Hello, hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. James here, as ever, for today's ACCA SBL video, where we're going to walk and talk through some top tutor tips how to pass your examination. And I know just the gentleman who is going to guide us through that. I'd love to introduce you to Ashim onto the channel, where you better get a pen and paper because this could be the difference in getting you that 50 plus and a pass. So actually, without me stealing your thunder anymore, feel free to introduce yourself, my friend.
Oh, thanks, James. Listen, first of all, let me say it's great to be back here. It's been a while since we last spoke and recorded a video, and so it's great to kind of pick up on that. And also, I need to share with the audience. Hopefully, we're going to be meeting in Warsaw. In the middle of this year. Hopefully, if everything works out, so I'm really looking forward to doing that. So yeah, thanks for the intro. I think the first thing to say is, if you're talking about top tips, not only will you need a pen, but you'll need a notebook actually, because there are just so many of them for SBL. But we'll come to that in a minute. So you asked me to introduce myself. Well, I've been in the training business for, well, gosh, over 25 years. In fact, I'm sticking at 25. It's probably closer to 30 now. And as well as training in the UK, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and so on, I've also run a couple of training businesses, international training business, so ACCA International, which operated in this region, and then for a couple of years I was with the EY Training Center, where I was executive director for Middle East and North Africa. In terms of my training experience, gosh, so many subjects over the years. I think my peak was 8 subjects I taught, something like this, and that was simply because at the time there was a need for someone to teach those, and so I picked those up. But it's worked out really well for SBL because as everyone probably who's watching this right now knows, there's a lot of assumed knowledge from earlier subjects that's included in the SBL syllabus and examinations, and so that kind of experience of teaching those subjects, as well as, of course, the hands-on experience of running a couple of businesses, feed really well into the SBL.
Spot on, spot on. So to get the ball rolling, sort of what is your first sort of area for SBL if an ACCA student comes to you and says, how do we tackle this to pass it?
Right. I think the first thing I would say is you need a mindset that is different to that which you've needed for other examinations, right? So, all of us, we've sat dozens of exams over our lives, and there's an approach that most exams have in common. With SBL, it's different. And so you need to come in being prepared to think differently about it and approach your preparation differently. So what does that mean? Well, it means lots of things, as I say, but I think the first thing to recognize is that because it's got this enormous case study in it, lots of exhibits and so on, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information which needs to be absorbed, analyzed, and then applied to the questions in the exam itself. Now, I know that's changing from September of this year, where the case study will be pre-seen, so that takes a bit of pressure off in the examination, but nonetheless, it's still a lot of information to take on. So in order to do what I've just described, you need a system, you need an approach. All right, you need an approach which maximize, I like this phrase, maximizes your mark efficiency. In other words, how do you maximize the number of marks you earn per minute that you spent in that examination, right? Because, I've taught hundreds of students since the SBL exam started in September 2018, the first sitting. And I've seen so many different approaches. Some students will spend ages and ages planning an answer, and that's a mistake because it's simply not earning you marks. Some people will just scan the exhibits, the case study, and then leap straight into answering the task. And that's not a good use of your time, because after about 3 sentences of answering that task, you kind of you hit a wall, right? Say, now what else can I say? And then you go back and you reread the exhibits, and you end up doing that umpteen times. And again, that's not an efficient use of your time. And the other area, of course, is time discipline. Now, I know that every exam has time pressure, right? Every exam does. But with something like SBL, students kind of don't take the time discipline that seriously, certainly not at the beginning of the exam. Why? Well, first of all, it's a 4-hour exam, so they think, oh, I've got loads of time. All the other papers are only 3 hours. I've got an extra hour. Isn't the ACCA nice? Giving me all this extra time. But actually, they give it to you for a very, very good reason, and your time discipline has to be perfect. The second reason they don't take the time discipline so seriously is because, and this is a very, very natural thing. We read a task, we kind of work out what we would do in the real world if we were faced with this challenge. We craft an answer, we communicate that on, and it's just so perfect. We're so excited about it that it's really difficult for us to stop writing our answer when time runs out. And so there is this kind of tendency to overrun on time, which makes it difficult for you to do yourself justice in the later questions. In fact, what has been found in various reviews of student performance is that the students who do the best are the ones that have had a fair go at all of the questions in the exam, right? So across the board, rather than who've done brilliantly in question 1 and 3 and completely ignored the rest of the paper.
My word. It's just, you got to answer the whole 100 marks on there, because we need 50 to pass. And if you've only answered 80, you're making your world so much more tricky.
Exactly right. Exactly right. But there is this temptation, as I say, to kind of show off to the marker how brilliant you are about, a particular area and I always remind my students, I said, look, the marker is not interested in how brilliant you are. The marker is interested in what you can give him that earns a mark, and he'll give you that mark, right? And that's the way you need to think. You need a kind of a scientific approach, if you like, to SBL and other papers as well. But I find this, different about SBL. The other tip about that I would give to SBL students is around professional skills and professionalism, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, professional skills are being introduced at all the strategic professional stage papers now, but they were first introduced at SBL. And so there's a lot of confusion, amongst students. Well, how do I demonstrate it? And so, you can understand, you can learn the ACCA's definition of each of those. There's plenty of information. There are lots of videos around. But unless you actually apply that, to an answer, only then does it, does the light kind of go off and say, aha, this is what analysis means, or this is what evaluation means, right? And you improve your ability to do that in one way, and that is by getting feedback, right? By getting an outsider to look at that objectively, look at your answer and say, okay, now in my opinion, this is not enough, or this is enough of a demonstration of that professional skill, right? And this is crucial because, as 20% of the marks are for the professional skills in SBL, and so feedback is critical for SBL, of course, for the professional skills marks, but of course also for the rest of your answer. So that's critical. That's a top tip. Be really solid on your professional skills, and the way to do that is by practicing them and then getting feedback. right?
Definitely. And to add to that, I always advocate for the ethics and professional skills module that
Oh gosh, yeah,
the
absolutely,
ACCA actually put out there on their website, that
yeah,
students who sit the SBL exam, who have done their ethics and professional skills module beforehand, drastically increase their chances
that's right.
of passing the examination because they've been through the process and they apply it to the scenario better in the examination.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the number is 15% improvement as
Crikey.
a result of doing the EPSM. I mean, I'll take that. I'll
Oh,
take
yeah.
15% improvement. Um, the other area of confusion is professionalism. And students say, what's the difference between professional skills and professionalism? Now, I mean, I could go on and on for ages talking about that, but essentially what the ACCA is saying is, listen, when you qualify and you go out into the big wide world as a professional person, there is a certain standard of behavior, analysis, communication that is expected of you.
Yeah.
There is, people trust professionals in the same way as we trust our doctor or our dentist or our lawyer when we seek their help, right? People trust us as professionals. And therefore, we need to demonstrate what being a professional is in the SBL exam. And the ACCA tests that through what they call professionalism. And they give you ideas, they give you a list of areas which they use, a list of criteria, if you like, which they use and expect from students. For example, making sure that the tone of your answer is
Mm.
appropriate, right? So if you're presenting to the board of directors, you want to have a tone which is professional, but which is also polite, if you like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you're being critical or critically evaluating or skeptical professional skill,
Mm-hmm.
to do that in a way which maintains a certain cordiality. Okay, so that's an example. Now, if a marker's looking at a script and feels that this does not demonstrate professionalism, then what you're doing is you're putting at risk some of the professional skills marks
Mm.
that you would have earned.
Definitely,
You know?
definitely. And it just comes with practice, doesn't it, as well?
Oh, of
Sitting
course.
down, we're talking just the bread and butter, that if you're at the SBL level doing this exam, you will know the benefit of just question practice, to time, as if it was on the exam conditions,
Absolutely.
on the CBE platform as well. That's another
Absolutely.
time-saving mechanism. How much of an advocate are you as you're nodding away for those sort of techniques?
No, no doubt. No, no, absolutely no doubt. In fact, on my courses with my students, I do everything on the ACCA's Test Reach CBE platform. Everything. To me, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Look, you're going to be sitting the real exam on that platform. You may as well get used to it, and the
Mm,
sooner the better, quite frankly.
mm,
Also, as I mentioned earlier, there's a system, right, that I advocate, and I want students to get used to applying that system on the platform, right? So, copy paste this, analyze this, make these notes, etc., so that by the time, and of course the mock exams which I set are all done on the platform, so that by the time the student gets into the real exam, this is kind of bread and butter for him. I mean, this is easy. He or she doesn't need to actually think about the platform and, oh my God, what do I do now? And what does this button mean? It comes naturally.
mm,
And one of the major advantages, two major advantages, one, of course, is you don't waste time faffing about seeing what
mm,
do I do next. And the second is that it actually calms you down
mm,
because you go into the exam. It's stressful, right? Every exam's stressful. You go into the exam and irrespective of what the exam asks, what you're going to do in the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes,
exactly.
right? And you find that suddenly you find yourself creating, an approach, an answer to this exam. And that gives you confidence. And when you're confident, when you're relaxed,
Mm,
that's when the ideas start flowing. That's
mm,
when things come together. That's when you allow your mind to rove across the information given the different exhibits in SBL, and say, oh yeah, I remember Exhibit 3 said something about this, and that connects with something in Exhibit 4. But you can only do that when you're relaxed.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
What the old adage of fail to prepare, prepare to.
absolutely right.
Exactly. So that you've got
Prepare to fail.
yes, indeed. We better finish that one just for for the record as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. Yeah.
But if we were talking for a sort of game plan that if yourself or one of your students that had to go sit the SBL exam, do you advocate for maybe going for the bigger questions first or the smaller questions? What's that sort of system game plan that you advocate works a treat?
Okay, sure. So first of all, I recommend 1 hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first hour to be used on the reading, planning, reflection time, right? And with my students, I go through a whole lot of detail, exactly what you do, right? So
Yep.
now you're ready to start answering the questions. Now, what the ACCA recommends, and I agree with this, is that the questions should be attempted sequentially, right? So why? Well, because they do tend to follow on from one another,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the picture is built up, right? So the organization faces this challenge, and then this changes, and then, the CEO wants to report on this, and they kind of hang together, and you're building up a story.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, in terms of number of marks, they do vary immensely. So you get some questions which are mega questions, earn 30 or more marks, and there are some which have 18 marks. And remember, this includes professional skills marks, right?
Yeah.
So really just go through it one after the other, and do as much. It goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? So do as much as you can. If you get stuck, it's something you can't think of, don't sit there scratching your heads, right? Move on to the next part of the question, right? And keep going. And then later on, if you find yourself with enough time, come back and finish off whatever you haven't. But also please remember that by the time you run out of things to say, you've probably earned enough marks to pass that part of the question.
Mm.
You probably have. And so don't carry that guilt with you. Oh gosh, I'm going to fail, because I didn't finish. No, no, no. Um, so yeah, that's what I mean about mentality, mindset,
Definitely.
and technique. So yeah, sequentially, you attempt
As you
questions.
go through. And to add to that, from the SBL examiners reports, so many students fall into the trap of just sort of writing waffle that's very
Oh
generic as
gosh.
well. Please get it written down that the examiner does not want to see that. They want application to the scenario, relating back to the sort of, there'll be some key buzzwords in the requirements as well that
Yes,
you've got to refer
absolutely.
to. All
Yeah.
these things just come with technique, and it'll be, you've got to build those blocks
Oh
to get
gosh,
yourself
yes.
ready for the exam.
Gosh. Yeah. Well, you see, this is another thing that makes SBL quite different, right, to other exams. So, for example, in other exams, you might say, well, you might be given some information on competition, right? New companies enter the market, whatever it is, right? And so the student will say, okay, well, the company's facing a competitive environment because company X has entered the market.
Yeah.
Full stop. Say, okay, well, made my point, you know, and actually you haven't. You've earned 0 marks. Why?
Mm.
Because you haven't added any value, right?
Mm.
All you've done is you've copy pasted from the question, you know, and so I always say to my students, I say, look, imagine you were saying this to the board of directors, because most of the
Mm.
questions require that you make a presentation to someone at board level, right? And you're standing there and say, by the way, board of directors, there's a new competitor in our market. And they'll look at you and they say, yeah, and we know that, that's why we want you to tell us, to analyze the situation and tell us where we should be looking, what we should be doing about it. That's why we hire you as a professional, right?
Mm.
And that's exactly what the SBL examiner is looking for. And unfortunately, students kind of tend to think, well, I've said, I've picked up the main point here, and that's all I need to do. Not
Mm.
true. And that's why, one of the frameworks I kind of go on and on In fact, one of my students who recently passed, she sat SBL 10 times and failed, and then yeah, I know. I've got a video recording of her actually on my YouTube channel. But anyway, she sat my revision course, and she said, "You know what, Ashim? I used to hear your voice at night saying, 'State, explain, apply.'" And I thought, what an awful experience that must have been for you. You know, but it, I'm happy in one sense,
Yeah.
because as long as the student can hear it in their voice when they're sitting the exam, they're not done my job, right?
Exactly. So for anyone with your pen and paper there, and you could also hear Ashim's voice in your sleep as
Yeah.
well. State,
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 explain,
explain.
apply,
Fantastic
apply,
on there.
right?
And it's
So
the application is the key bit on there.
that's where you earn your marks. That's
Mm,
where you're showing the board of directors, right, that um, as a professional, I would recommend, having analyzed the situation, the challenge, this is what we should do, or this is what this means, what impact it's going to have on the organization, all right, what impact it's going to have on the stakeholders. All of those things is what the board wants to hear, right? Because you're the expert, you're the professional, right? So that's what they want to hear, and that's the application part, and that's unfortunately where a lot of students fail to pick up the marks. They may know it, but they say, well, that's obvious. Well, until
mm.
you write it down, guys, you're not going to get any marks for it.
Exactly. And lots of students fall into the trap, I think myself included, when I was back in the day, where you sort of look through your work and you look through the past paper questions and you go, yeah, probably got that, probably
Yeah,
got that.
yeah, yeah.
And honestly, you just need to be really harsh on yourself and really critical, because I'd rather find out 3 weeks before my exam that I'm
Exactly.
not up to standard, I'm not writing enough in detail, I've not applied back to the scenario, versus I think lots of people just think, I've wrote enough there, I've got a few points, and it just comes back to exam technique and the learning process on there.
And the practice, so the application of that technique. I mean, this, and as you say, it just comes back also to the feedback,
Mm,
right? Until someone tells you that you're not applying, you don't know that. Yeah,
mm,
because it's just what you described. Yeah, you looked at you looked at a suggested solution. You say, yeah, pretty much there. No, because yeah, so again, it's so critical to have feedback, of course, for every exam, but for SBL, it's absolutely vital, because it's very difficult to
definitely,
see.
definitely.
In my online program, I have 3 mock exams. So the first one is at the end of the tuition, inverted commas, phase. And the whole aim of it, and students get really upset or worried about this. And I say, look, don't. The whole point of this is to find out what it is you need to get better at. And
Mm,
then the student and their peers can focus on getting them better at it,
mm,
right? So that by the time they come to the second mock exam and third mock exam, they're ready to go. They hit the ground running.
mm.
Um, so yeah, absolutely, and that's a very, very typical challenge that
Yeah,
students have, the
I
application.
yeah, I agree, and obviously the exam's going to transition to is it 3.25 hours for when the
Yeah,
update
it's going to be
comes?
like the others. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But still, nevertheless, you've got to get familiar, whether you're doing the 4 hour paper, for focusing for 4 hours, and your brain is going to be on overload as well for it. So training yourself, and even when it goes to 3.25, in the run up, that you sat down in exam conditions, no distractions, no
Oh, of
phone,
course.
all of these little things, I can't tell you how much they add up to you getting a better score and just picking up on those extra few marks on there.
Oh gosh, couldn't have said it better myself, James. Absolutely. The basic principles that the examiner is looking for will not change. It's
Mm,
just that you have access to the case study earlier. But
mm,
please remember that when you sit the real exam, you're going to be given additional information which you're going to have to absorb. Right. And then put in the context of the original case study, or the case study that you've been given, and
mm,
then craft an answer and communicate that answer
mm.
in a professional way, reflecting the professional skills, stating, explaining, and applying at the same time. So it's still a huge challenge,
Mm.
right? It doesn't get any easier just because you see the case study earlier, right? And again, that's why what I've said about about, preparing right. In other words, preparing with feedback, with hands-on practice on the platform under timed conditions is so critical.
Yeah.
It's so critical. So
No,
yeah.
exactly. And these tips that we've ran through today, it's got a 50% pass rate on there. This will help you to be in that 1 in 2 that will actually get you through and to get you the pass mark on there. So I mean, Ashim, are there any sort of final aspects of SBL that you couldn't sleep tonight that we needed to get on record to help students that could be the 50 plus?
Absolutely.
What else have we got?
Absolutely. Okay, so here's a big one, right? Remember that SBL is not a theoretical paper, right? You are never going to be asked in the examination to name and describe a framework or a model, right? The board of directors doesn't care what a framework or model is. So again, that makes SBL very different to other papers, right? So it's not a test of knowledge. Now, you may use a framework or model to structure your thoughts, to structure your answer when applying your solution to the challenge. That's up to you. It's your choice. Think of those as tools. In fact, I had one of my students got, I think it was 89%.
Wow.
And he didn't use a single model the whole exam, right? So I think a lot of students get really kind of tied up about, learning definitions, learning models, of course, understand the model. Yeah, but recognize that it's not about the model and it's not about the theory, because the answer to an SBL question is not in any textbook. It comes from here.
Oh, fantastic. And if students apply that in their examination, their marks are only going to go one way, and that hopefully is going to be to reach that 50 threshold and to get them over the line.
And way above, mate, way above. Yeah. Aim high.
Exactly. Well, feel free to leave in the comments, everyone, if you get 89 or higher. I'd love to hear from that.
Yes. But just don't tell. They shouldn't tell their friends that, because can you imagine going to a party and someone, a non-accountant, comes along and says, so how are you? Well, I'm great. I got 89% in SBL. They'll think you're such a sad person. You obviously don't have a life because all you do is study, and it's a good way of losing friends. So what you should say, even if you get 89%, say, I just about made it, 51. Whew, living on the edge.
Top stuff. Top stuff on there. Well, Ashim, thank you so much for all of your insights,
a lot of fun.
sharing them today. Guys, if you've enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a massive like and thumbs up, and feel free to share this video if you've got a study buddy who's also doing SBL, because as we've said, the tips could just be the difference in getting that 50 plus. So
Absolutely.
Be sure to subscribe so you can watch myself and Ashim's other videos as well. And I've put all of his details in the description. So feel free to reach out, drop us a message on LinkedIn, or just leave us a comment below. We'll be sure to get back to you to help you out. But Ashim, thank you so much again, my friend, and for all of
so much, Brett. It was so much fun. And I just want to wish everyone who's listening the very best of luck when they sit SBL. Just I've tried to share as much as I can in this video. Follow it, okay? Do your best, practice, get feedback, and you'll be just fine.
Oh, well, on that bombshell, best of luck, everyone, and we'll see you soon for another video. Thank you.
Bye now.